Are you ready to become the balanced leader you are destined to become? Then stay right here. Welcome to today's Balanced Leader, where we empower today's leader to be the best that you can be, both in your professional and personal life. I'm your host, Caroline Baird, and I've explored and believe the intersection of wellness and leadership are key to finding the balance you are craving as a leader. This is the show where we focus on leadership and the importance of maintaining balance in today's fast-paced and constantly changing world. We talk about topics related to leadership, from communication and team building to personal development and finding balance during challenging times. We will also hear from inspiring guests who have achieved success in their fields and have valuable insights to share about their leadership journeys and on what it takes to be a successful leader. But this podcast isn't just about leadership, it's also about wellness too. Taking care of your mind, body, and spirit is essential to becoming a successful leader, and you'll get tips and strategies for living a healthy, balanced life, from managing burnout and improving mental health, to finding ways to reset and reground during a typical day at work so that you can achieve your goals. So whether you're a CEO, an entrepreneur, or just someone looking to improve your leadership skills, this podcast is for you. Are you ready? Well, let's get going.
Hi, it's Caroline. In this inspiring episode of today's Balanced Leader, we're going to welcome Dr. Sweta Chawla, a leadership coach, speaker, and facilitator who empowers professionals to lead with authenticity and balance. Dr. Sweta will share her unique journey from a pharmacist to leadership coach and discuss how to cultivate authentic leadership in oneself and in teams. Together, we'll discover the importance of knowing oneself, designing based on data, and the power of emotional intelligence. And as always, we'll take away practical strategies for overcoming common leadership challenges and explore the role of storytelling and connecting brilliance to leadership. Don't want to miss those transformative insights aimed at enhancing balance and impact in the workplace? Then stick around, because here we go. Welcome to today's episode of today's Balanced Leader. I'm happy to invite Dr. Sweta Chawla, the speaker, facilitator, and leadership coach who empowers dedicated professionals to reinvent how they work and lead for greater authenticity, balance, and impact. Dr. Sweta truly is gifted at helping emerging leaders and those who develop them. She supports her clients to shape their narratives on their terms, connect their brilliance to their leadership, and by leading with authenticity and being unapologetic about their desire for balance, make more impact at work. Her background as a pharmacist and an immigrant gives her a unique understanding of the challenges diverse rising leaders face to excel at work, but often at the cost of their own joy, well-being, and fulfillment, which is truly a topic we talk about at today's Balanced Leader. She is a step into the Moxie certified facilitator, author of a book, I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For, Now What, and contributor to the award-winning anthology She's Got This, Essays on Standing Strong and Moving On. She has spoken on stages and panels, including at the White House and for the Kaiser Permanente, and facilitated at Hewlett-Packard and the Stanford University Graduate School of Business. Team, I can't tell you how excited I am to have Dr. Sweta with us today because she's got some amazing shares that she's going to be celebrating with us today. So stay tuned and make sure you listen to this episode. But welcome to today's Balanced Leader.
Thank you so much for having me. I just love the title of your podcast. So even when I saw it, I was like, oh, I know this is going to be a perfect fit.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Yes, we talked a little bit off the air, which I always tell my listeners I do. So I get to know my guests, and there just seemed to be such a compatibility between what you do and what I'm attempting to do in the podcast world to help today's leaders. So maybe first start by telling us a little bit about your journey. Interesting, you were a pharmacist and then you became a leadership coach and speaker. So let's talk a little bit about what inspired this transition.
Sure. So I was a professor of pharmacy and a clinical director for over a decade. And it was really a great job. I mean, I truly loved what I did. I felt like I had golden handcuffs. So I did feel like I had quite a bit of balance. I got tons of vacation, I had a lot of autonomy. And then my son was born premature. And I always say that my son's premature birth was kind of like my COVID. It was that kind of time in life where a lot of people start to look deeper at what they want and what they want their life to be like, what they want their work to be like. And so I took a deeper look into my life. And even though my work was good, I felt like there was something missing and there was more that I should be doing in the world, but I didn't know what that was. And so I hired a career coach and I went on this kind of long, windy journey to my own authenticity and discovered that I never wanted to be a pharmacist. I loved teaching and I was coaching when I was teaching, so there was a lot of using my what I call my brilliance in my job, but the actual topic, the focus of drugs, it was not really in an integrity and an alignment with my values anymore. And so that's how I kind of found my way into coaching, which iterated different types of coaching. But I've been leadership and a communication coach for the last several years, and I absolutely love it. And I love supporting people that are like in your community, emerging leaders, to really be able to be in their authenticity, make the impact they want to while still having, honoring their own well-being as well.
That's great. And we've talked a little bit off air, so I have a ton of questions for you that I want you to share. But maybe we'll start with, if you think about that word, authentic leadership, it can be overwhelming for some individuals because what does that truly mean? And Google doesn't always do it a service. So, what would you say authentic leadership means to you, and why is it so crucial in today's leaders?
I just want to say, yes, it's so true. Like I do leadership development in, certain companies. And when we get to that section around authenticity, a lot of people think it means just like saying whatever you want. And that's not how I define authenticity. To me, authenticity is really about being who you are, not who you think you should be. And I know that just seems like, okay, what does that even mean? And that's just maybe like a, cute shift. But there's actually a lot of depth in that statement, because what I find is that a lot of people do not actually know who they are. They don't really know what their values are. They don't know how they're designed. They don't really know what their needs are. And so if you don't know that, then it's hard to be able to lead from that place, which I think is so essential, especially today, because, the world has been through such a great transformation, and people, can see through can see through the kind of what we think a leader should be, kind of holding it all together and having all the answers and being perfect. And it kind of dehumanizes the experience that we're going through, that definitely shows up in the workplace. There's no more separation of home and work anymore. I don't ever really think there was, because I really believe we're one person, so I don't think that was ever effective to kind of try to compartmentalize ourselves and shut ourselves off. But COVID, Zoom meetings, work coming into our home really, really made that very kind of in front of our face. And so we have to find a way to really be who we are, because we can't kind of compartmentalize it. And there's power in that. There's power in, again, knowing your values, knowing your needs, knowing how you're designed, and being able to communicate it in an effective way that's true and honest, but without any righteousness. So it's not about kind of being right or saying whatever you want. It's in honor of what's best for kind of the organization, the people you're working with, the projects that you're working on. So it's not about being unfiltered. It's just about allowing in more vulnerability and transparency as you're trying to solve problems or develop people in your team.
I love, when you add that with honoring your gifts, honoring what you have that is different, that is unique. I think so often in today's world, people are either just so, here's the company objective, this is so we get from A to Z, this is how we get there. Or they've got a little bit of that imposter syndrome, right? So this is who I believe the business wants to be. And so hence I don't get to be authentic and be an authentic leadership and truly bring the gifts that are so needed in today's corporate world. And I loved how you talked a little bit about that empowered expression, if you will. So how do you think today's leader could cultivate that in themselves and in their teams?
Several ways. I think the very first thing is, before we get to kind of the expression piece of it, I have this wisdom model, and it's called the well-resourced professional. And the first pillar is all about authentic leadership. And some of the things that I really coach people on is kind of redefining roles, redefining success, right? So like leader, what does leader mean? What does expert mean? Because many of us, when we kind of get into a new position. I know when I became a professor, I definitely had imposter syndrome. And I think that was legit because I was a pretty young professor, but it never went away. And I, do a lot of coaching and offer a lot of workshops on imposter syndrome. And it's because we've kind of cultivated these archetypes that come with the identity of the role that we're playing. So for example, in my case, being a professor, I needed to be an expert, right? If I'm granted this title, like I can't ask for help. I can't, pretend like I don't know the answer. That's all like not true, but that's all of the stuff that I brought with me when it came to that title. And I think many people have that. It might be different, they're often very similar archetypes, but the flavors could be different. So you might have brought on the perfectionist, or there's these various archetypes, the natural genius, right? Or the superhuman. And if you're not aware that you're bringing those kind of that baggage or with that, all these things with the identity of the role that you're playing, then you can't be in your most authentic leadership because you're performing who you think you should be, as opposed to, again, what's the best that you can bring to this role and really being able to be present in what's needed in this role. So we're putting a lot of energy on ourselves, how we look, how we're performing, which not only causes more stress, so talk about being imbalanced, but we're not actually modeling for our team and for other people or creating a culture of authenticity when we're not, really being present to where do we feel that, we really can bring our gifts? Where do we feel like we have knowledge? Where do we feel confident to take certain risks? And where do we feel like, we're unsure, or this is not our strength of ours, and where can we access help? You can't get to that place if you're kind of in this is how I should be. You don't know where you're good and where you need more support. So the first piece is kind of that redefining. And I also call it like kind of taking your power back, right? We're taking our power back from these titles, that culture has, or the expectations that culture has put on certain titles. And to me, that's the first part about the empowered expression. You need to be empowered. You need to know that your role is to do the best with what you have in a certain situation. And that can look like not being perfect. That could look like not having all the answers. But your intention is to serve the organization and or serve your team. To me, that is true leadership. And then you can go on to kind of express, what you need, where you feel strong, what you're confused about, where you'd like more input. And we could definitely go more into kind of the vocal empowerment piece, but I just wanted to start off with that piece because I think it's an essential foundation. Is that self-awareness of, again, and clarity so that we know what we're really working with.
Well, and if you think about just the examples you gave them, I think people can resonate with even times in their life. Maybe they've not worked or shown up in that style or behavior. You talked about the various imposter syndromes. I was smiling because I was like, yeah, I can relate to that one. Or being a perfectionist, or right, hey, I'm the subject matter expert now. I need to know it all. But that's not the case. I often speak to the listeners about, as a leader, you are the person that leads a team. You don't have to have all the answers, but you need to be able to lead, or to be able to have that calm about you when something doesn't go the way it's supposed to go, where you can rally the troops and go, okay, it didn't work, but I know we can fix this. And so let's brainstorm together and find ways to fix it, right?
Yeah. If you're spending a lot of energy on how you're being perceived, then you're not actually being of service, like you're saying, to actually rally and lead, the team to be able to solve the problem together.
So let's talk a little bit about,
Yeah.
and I love this piece of your background. You talk about being an immigrant and it influenced your leadership and coaching style. Maybe share a little bit about that, because that I'm definitely intrigued with that.
Absolutely. So I'm an Asian immigrant. I was born in India. I came when I was very young, so you don't hear an accent, but I very much internalized kind of the immigrant mindset. And what we're taught as immigrants is to assimilate, right? To assimilate, to not rock the boat, to be the good student, to really be on the honor roll, work hard, put our head down, and not never assert ourselves. And I have worked globally with many women, and I'm a woman as well, so there's a lot of internalization that comes with being the messages that we get as women as well. I've worked with many women, Asian women and other immigrants globally, and when you're in a leadership development program and you're being told to assert yourself, right? Again, there's a lot of expectations that are kind of like a picture that we have of leadership that either go against how we're naturally designed or what we've been taught. And so part of my own journey and what I help many of my clients do is to be able to really unpack that, right? For example, being introverted, what of that is actually true to your design? Because I really think it works against us if we try to be something we're not. Again, that's being inauthentic. But how much of that is actually conditioned that I
Mhm.
shouldn't speak up? I shouldn't, especially being in Asian cultures, we're definitely taught not to, and I'm generalizing here, but I know it's pretty common. I've worked with a lot of Asian people, to not rock the boat. And so oftentimes when it comes to asserting ourselves and, because again, it's not only about the vulnerability piece, this is what I don't know, but being able to say, hey, like, I really feel strongly about this. I have this idea, or I'm really gifted in this, and I'd like to take the lead in this project, on this role. Me, even if I don't have a degree in it or like all this experience, right? But I have these skills from other ways that I've been able to express them. It's hard to be able to kind of have the confidence to assert ourselves in that way if we're fighting, again, all of these internalized messages from culture, from our family, et cetera. And so I really think, part of the journey, if you're an immigrant, is to unhook from that immigrant mindset, kind of get curious about what is the immigrant mindset that you've internalized. What are the messages that you have been delivered to you over and over again, and which one of them maybe are true to your values or maybe are true to who you are, right? How can we kind of work with those? But then what really isn't kind of who you naturally are and not your values? Like, I really believe in, a big part of my own journey, as along with a lot of activism and social justice, is like taking up space. I was like, as a woman, as an Asian woman, my activism is taking up space. And that took a tremendous amount of courage because, like I said, the messages I got both culturally, familiarly, is like, kind of hide yourself.
Yeah, and I would agree with you being, you could even look at generations, right? If you think about the different generations. So my listeners know I turned 60 this year. And so when I think back, that was something that I really had to overcome as well, right? Because I was raised, and I always say, listen, it wasn't traumatic. My parents did the best they could. But of course, the belief system was, you put on that brave face, you never show that there's something going on or that you've got problems, right? You've always got a smile on your face, you're quiet when you're spoken to. And so that took a long time to unwrap. And I think, too, when we look at the generations as things change decade by decade, because it truly is by decade, and now you look at some of the millennials or the Gen Zs, or they're now, you've now got leaders that are dealing with such a variety of
Yeah,
individuals that it can become a real challenge because you can't, and we know, as if we're true leaders, we know we can't use the same paintbrush to treat everybody the same,
exactly.
but it can become a real challenge because there's so many different things that you have to consider. What are your thoughts on how a leader keeps their cool but is able to communicate in an effective way when you're dealing with, everybody from, maybe you're working with 17-year-olds and you're dealing with, 60-year-olds as well? What would you say there?
Two things I would say. One is, I love what you said, you can't use the same paintbrush. And so I really think and this is, I work with this a lot with my clients, is that I really believe one of the most powerful leadership skills is discernment.
Mm.
Discernment comes with real like self-awareness and self-connection and emotional intelligence. It's being able to really be so present with yourself. So having done your own work, because we all bring in projections, we all bring in fears. It's, a lot of like what I talked about, taking your power back when it comes to titles, but also taking your power back when it comes to certain relationships. If we have judgments about millennials, right? Or if our boss reminds us of our dad, right? Like knowing that we have all of that stuff coming with us, not judging ourselves for it, that it's totally normal. But I think a lot of us think we shouldn't. And when we don't, we kind of just suppress it, but then we're still acting from that place. But if we can really get super curious and know ourselves so well, what am I bringing in with me again? And then come to that place of discernment of like, what is really true here? Like, what's my stuff, right? Kind of support ourselves through it. That's the emotional intelligence piece. And then meet with curiosity. Because I think when we're distracted by our own stuff, we can't actually be a present leader. But when we develop the skills to be able to be with our own emotions, to be curious about kind of where we're coming from, question ourselves, get those answers, then we can really be more present. And I really truly believe we all have an internal system that knows how to respond to any situation. But it's a matter of really being able to to know that, to connect to it, to build the muscle, to rely on it. And it really is such a powerful tool, because I've been in many situations where, how I respond to one person, the same exact situation would be very different how I respond to another person. Because, for example, I would know this person needs more empathy. They're hard on themselves. And so my response with them would be maybe to not to push them. However, another person might really need more stamina, need to develop themselves more, to push themselves a little bit more. I won't have access to that awareness if I'm not present with myself, or if I'm trying to spend all my energy trying to not feel whatever I'm feeling, right? So such a big part of being a leader, I think, is really strengthening your emotional, intelligence skills, and then responding in the present moment in situations. Now, if you have a group of people where people are coming from all different lenses, I think just naming it, naming it in the space and saying, I'm very aware that I'm coming from this, Gen X mindset. That's, and this is kind of the way that I think about things. We have a variety, a diversity in this group, people from different generations. I see that as a strength. I always think diversity is a strength, and I really invite listeners to see that in that way as well. And, what about you? What lens are you coming from? What can you offer and bring into this space, and welcoming that kind of variety and diversity, because then you have access to so many different types of solutions that we might not have been aware of.
I love that, because if you think about it, people will enter a space where they're communicating something. To your point, they know it's not going to land with everybody. So if I'm truly in tune with my team, I know these three people are going to be fine with the way I communicate it, and these three aren't. But to your point, calling it out and saying, hey, listen, let's have a conversation about it. Let me truly answer any questions, have that compassion, that empathy, is just a beautiful way to really support your team. Because I feel the other piece is, then when you do that, your team feels in that safe space and it feels free to come and talk to you about situations, because they know you may not get them, but that you'll listen to them and you'll help them through it. Because a lot of our
Yeah.
problems, they're common. Our problems, our fears, we've all got them. But it's
Yeah.
how we support each other through them. And so love that life coach mentality answer too, around being more aware
Yeah.
of
And I think,
yourself.
yeah, I also think it's the gift of the kind of transformation that we're going to collectively in the workplace, right? It's that shift from that leadership is hierarchy to collaborative leadership. And it helps us from our own kind of I need to know all the answers, right? Because then once we start to see, so I really think that when we open, with this mentality and this mindset of everybody has something to offer, we can collaborate on this, and then we see evidence that works, then our own nervous system starts to unhook from that. I need to know all the answers and I have to put everything on myself. So that's a powerful way to come into balance.
I don't disagree at all with that. And it speaks to one of my other questions that I had for you. I talked a little bit about, we all have the same fears, we all have the same similar experiences, just different, right? How we approach them. But the end
Yeah.
result is they have a similarity between them. So we've got, as a leader, some common challenges that we face. How would you say the best approach is for leaders to overcome common challenges that keep coming up and repeating themselves?
Within your team.
Yes, yeah. Hmm.
Well, I always say if something's happening over and over again, there's a system or an operational kind of issue going on, and it could literally just be an operations thing, a way that something's being done, or it could be a cultural kind of something that needs to be evolved. And so I really think one of the ways I always believe in looking at the big picture, right? So kind of looking at the data, taking a step back, meeting everything with curiosity. I just really think a big part of leadership is, it's not about separating your emotions, but really being able to be with your emotions and understand yourself and have that self-awareness, because we're humans, and it really is interferes a lot with kind of being effective and being present, which are all the things that lead to balance. And so again, kind of being curious about like, what is my own experience of the situation? And then going back to bringing other people in the space and bringing other people into the conversation and kind of just doing a data dump, right? Like, let's not try to solve the problem. Let's just try to get all the information of what do we think is the issue. And then once everybody starts to kind of put their input, then, then you know what you're working with, and you can come up with kind of experimental solutions, but you know what the solution is trying to solve. I think oftentimes we're trying to solve problems where we haven't actually identified what is actually the pattern. And then I think the most important thing is what's at the root of that pattern, right? Like if, for example, people are kind of chronically not meeting deadlines, right? And we just assume that they don't have the skills. And what we find out when we bring everybody into this space is that they're actually doing a lot of extra unnecessary work because they didn't really know how to prioritize, or they didn't really know they didn't get the direction of what to focus on. So they're trying to like do everything. Then that's going to be that's a different way to solve that problem. It's instead of training them more or trying to get them kind of skills, it's just getting clarity on priorities. Versus, let's say, maybe they are someone that doesn't know how to kind of have time management, right? So we really need, again, data. I really believe in designing based on your data. And that's one of the core pillars of my well-resourced kind of model is, if you want sustainability, you want to be able to design based on true data. So I really think getting curious about our own personal data, but the data of our specific team, as opposed to kind of, we tend to go to trainings and get like best tools and we get all this information, we try to implement it. And then it's just like, oh, like, again, it goes back to who I think I should be versus who I really am. Authenticity to me is really based on your data and then designing from that place to be able to optimize it to create more sustainability and balance.
I love that, because a lot of times training is not tailored to individuals, right? It's a training is for a number of people to take. How you use that training to tie into your own unique leadership style is what I've always found fascinating, because you can take elements of it and make yourself even a better leader by picking up one or two things. But if you think a training is going to solve it all, it's not going to solve it all. Unless, of course, it's an Excel course and you're needing to know how to do spreadsheets.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting because, like, I have this thing like with a lot of companies use like LinkedIn courses, and I mean, I love them. I've actually filmed, these courses myself. But again, if it's something that's general, if you don't have that deep kind of self-awareness, I think so much of leadership development is personal growth work, because if you don't have that self-awareness, then you don't know how to discern. You don't know how to say like, oh, that does apply to me. That doesn't apply to me because that's not actually based on how I'm designed, or that doesn't fit the culture of our company. You can't have that skill of discernment if you don't have the self-awareness. And that's why I think like coaching is so effective, because a big part of coaching is helping leaders to really have that self-awareness and that discernment.
Yes, yes, I don't disagree. I'm a passionate person about emotional intelligence. And so understanding what makes you tick, what your skill set is, what your values are. I mean, you even think about Simon Sinek's "What's Your Why," right? Things like that I think are really beneficial to understanding the type of leader you want to be. But also, at your core value,
Yeah.
what brings that passion to you? What is it that you truly enjoy?
Yeah, and you can bring, and when you do that yourself, then you can support your team members to do that as well. So if people are motivated internally because they know this project is connected to my why, this project is connected to my value, or my I want to do this project because I'm passionate about this. You don't have to like motivate your team. They're going to be intrinsically motivated. It's like a win-win for everybody, right? Because everybody has clarity on the value that they can bring to a project. And that doesn't mean that you're always going to do everything you love. You might have to do some things that you don't, but there's a big difference between 80% of your job not being in your passion or your skill set or connected to your values versus like 20% when it
Don't
comes
disagree.
to balance, right?
Don't disagree. Life is short. Make sure 80% is something you enjoy doing. That's for sure.
Exactly.
So let's talk a little bit about your wisdom model. And I know the well-resourced professional is what it's called, correct?
Correct.
Right. It has two pillars, authentic leadership and empowered expression. Let's elaborate a little bit on these pillars, and more around how they can support sustainable growth for emerging leaders.
Sure. So there's actually three pillars. And if you go to drswetachawla.com/master, and I know there's like kind of several resources we might be offering to your community, but this is one of them that you and I didn't talk about, but there's a class there that shows, that page shows the wisdom model. And then I have a recording of a master class that kind of goes through it. But the first one is that authentic leadership. The second is the empowered expression. And the third one is expand sustainably. So it's really about kind of growing and designing based on your data. And then they all have kind of, three elements within them. So I'm happy to share as much as you like for me to share what you think would be most helpful for everyone to hear.
Yeah, no, I'd love to hear a little bit about why you think those three pillars are kind of pivotal, and also maybe just kind of how they work together to support somebody being that better leader.
Yes, that's such a great question. So what I did was I went through all of my clients that I've coached, and I've been coaching for about 10 years. But really the last several years, I've had kind of a core kind of group of the types of people I work with who, are again, hardworking, but also deeply caring. And they want to have an impact. And they want to use their gifts. They want to be their more authentic selves. It's really important to them, and their well-being. They don't want to have it at the cost of their well-being or that balance, right? And I don't know about you, but I can tell you for myself and for all the people that I've worked with, like, I've not seen that. I've not actually seen an example of somebody who's having great impact that is balanced. And so I'd kind of like to unpack that a little bit and then kind of go into the three different aspects of my wisdom model. And I think it's because of the way that we approach balance and how, again, it's taking our power back from these words. What does balance really mean? And, if you go with the like having it all, especially like as a woman, right? Like I'm kicking off at work and I'm sorry, I just used.
No, you're good. You're good.
I have my 2.5 kids and my house is clean, etc. Like if we're measuring balance on these expectations that are not even like what we really want, what have been put on us, and that are virtually impossible because our systems don't support it, we're going to always fall short on balance, right? The way that I like to approach balance is from this place of harmony and really being able to be in harmony with the wholeness of our life and the different kind of seasons that we go through. And so I'm actually going to start with the third pillar in my framework, because the third pillar is, growing sustainably, expanding and growing sustainably. And a big part of that is being able to design based on your data, which I've mentioned several times. So one of the things that I help people, like it's two core things. It's about being natural, being, a big part of authentic leadership is being in your naturalness, right? And that's how we're designed, but I also look at how nature is designed. And if we look at the way the earth is designed, we have seasons, right? There's winter, there's spring, there's summer, there's fall, and they all have different, there's different rhythms to these seasons, right? We don't expect a constant bloom in winter, right? We also don't expect growth in fall. We know fall is about letting go. And I really think that we can learn so much from nature. And it's one of the most powerful tools for getting back into balance. Because if we look at our life like seasons, and we all have our, we can kind of go by natural rhythms, but also we all have our own rhythms. And I started to do this kind of unconsciously when I was in college. I started to notice that, in the fall, like I tend to be a lot fuller, right? And there was these certain patterns in my life. And then when you become a parent, or if you're in work, like I was a professor, so I knew summer had a different rhythm to it than the fall, than versus the winter, et cetera. And when I started to align with it, and I started to like be in harmony and manage my expectations based on that, life got so much more in flow, which is one of the concepts in that pillar, is like, how do you be in flow? And so I have this process called, designing by season, right? Or kind of quarterly planning. And there's a workbook that I have that you'll put a link to in the show notes where you can DIY it. Y'all can just, buy this workbook and I guide you through it. It's video and audio. I have two. I have that design by seasons, but I also have your North Star clarity tool, which goes to like, again, what's your why? Like, what are you looking for, right? Because again, oftentimes we're making decisions not really knowing like what's our why, what are we looking for, and knowing that we change, right? So like our why from this season might be different than our why from the next season. And so when we have that information and we have a process for being able to plan to help us to put us in rhythm with that, we are in so much more flow. And I know I shared a lot there, so I'm going to pause, but there are kind of some other elements to being coming into balance that I'd love to kind of share that are kind of unique to a lot of things that we hear. But I'm going to pause because I know I shared a lot. See if you have
No,
anything that you want to say.
that is beautiful. I'm big on seasons. It's part of why I became an energy healer as well, because I so connect with nature. But
Yeah.
I don't think we take the seasonality and really bring it into, we do, I think we sometimes can bring seasonality into our personal lives, but we never think about bringing it into our professional lives. So I'm going to let you continue because this is really intriguing. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe like when it comes to the work culture, we have a belief that we should always be in summer in full bloom. You know, it's always productivity mode. And I'm gonna like the culture definitely puts that on us. But I think oftentimes again, we've internalized it. I have seen so many of my clients that they work really hard, they work on weekends, they work when they come home because of their own expectation on themselves. It's not necessarily the work. And we tend to think it's always the work culture. And I'm not going to say that it's not, right? But the big part of being a leader is shifting culture. It's really kind of questioning certain dynamics and how can we, if our goal is to have a thriving culture, is to have sustainability, then we might have to rock the boat and do things differently and kind of set a new culture based on how we're showing up. And that could be hard again if we've so indoctrinated in being kind of the good student, the hard worker, et cetera. But it's been done. I've seen so many of my clients do it and kind of just having that aha and that realization of like, oh my God, when I go home, I'm so cranky and I'm like yelling at my kids all the time. And I don't want that. I want to really be able to enjoy my kids. And something so little is taking off evening meetings from the schedule,
Mm.
like something so small like that. And then seeing again the data, right? Like I had a really good week with my kids. I was super present with them. What contributed to that? Oh, I took evening meetings off. And the like I really believe the more we fill up, right? Genuinely fill up with what fills us up, it has like a lasting imprint on our capacity and our bandwidth. And so that kind of first unique thing that I see a lot that people have a hard time with when it comes to balance is that most of us are bad receivers. Like we just don't know how to receive. And, you know, we're so like, oh, I'm so busy. I have a million things to do. But like, we're not in our leadership. We're not, you know, kind of saying, where can I get more support? And I know like I'm notorious for that. And at the end of last year, I had a huge shift where I was like, oh my God, most of my life, I've either been seeking connection or space, right? Especially after becoming a mom. And at the end of the year, I'm like, I feel both connected and spacious. This is like a miracle. What did I do differently? And the biggest shift that I made was seeing my own actions and seeing how I'm trying to get my needs met sideways.
Mm.
So the fall was a very busy season for me. It's always a busy season work-wise. I had these new, huge, big projects coming in. My son was starting middle school. And you know, they could bring up a lot of emotions and, you know, he has like special needs, et cetera. So I was kind of pushing really hard to get my husband to kind of parent like I parent. And if anybody here is married, you can probably know that never works really well. And I just paused. And this is what you can do. This is a really powerful tool and it seems so simple, but it is a game changer. And I just paused. I literally put my hand on my heart. I invite you to do that. What need am I trying to get met? Like, why am I doing this? Right? What do I want to feel? What does my husband parenting like me give me? And it was this feeling of like, if he can parent like me, I can like give what I need to do to my work and not come home and give more because I wouldn't have the capacity. I was already being stretched at work because not only was it a lot of projects, but there were new projects. So
Right.
there was going to be a learning curve there. That's not, you know, and that self-awareness to know like, oh, if we're in a new role, if we're there's a new shift, like there's a learning curve. And if we expect to like be on top of it right away, we're putting stress and pressure on ourselves. But I need a run strip here. Like I need some time and I need to give to myself even more. And so I did something that was so out of character for me, which is what I'm looking for is space, right? To digest, to give to myself, to just, not think about parenting, not think about work. So I booked Airbnbs before I needed them, before the busy season came on. I booked an Airbnb with a hot tub and a pool because that's what I love. I let my family come. I said, you can swim for an hour and then you leave. And I gave myself a weekend of just filling myself up with quiet time because that's the thing I'm always seeking is space. And it was mind blowing to to do self-care before instead of after. And I did it one more time in that fall season. Like I stayed in a hotel on the way back from a busy project. I mean, I was a happier mother. I was a happier wife. I was so delighted with my projects at the end. They were such powerful shifts. And I know not everybody can do that. I'm not telling you to go rent an Airbnb, but taking that pause of what need am I trying to get met? If you're seeing yourself like whack-a-moling, trying to like put out all the fires, what need am I trying to get met? And like, how can I receive it now? Not earn it, not get permission from someone else, but just give it to yourself right now. The ripples of it are just incredible. And it's so kind of counterintuitive, but all the things that you're trying to do, like meet everybody else's needs, actually happen much more sustainably when you give it to yourself first.
Well, you also teach those around you, whether it's your partner, your child, your colleagues, you also teach them that it's okay to do that. It's okay to pause and reflect. I often used to think, I'm more of my style, I guess, is more of a thought-provoking leader. And so a lot of times when I would be in meetings, if you asked me for my immediate response, I sometimes didn't have one because I was somebody who wanted to take away and digest it. Because I know what my response would be for me, but is that the right response? Is that the right response for the team, for the business, for the customer, or whatever that might be? And so I used to defer and ask for a pause, but I love the pause effect for self and identifying. So I just was on a Martha Beck call. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her. She's a life coach and she teaches the Wayfinder. And there's this program I'm taking right now where she talks about journaling and how journaling has helped her to identify things that bring her joy and peace and passion and things that don't sit well with her. So she'll pause throughout the day and kind of go, okay, well, how do I feel right now? Well, if I'm not feeling good, what did I just do that maybe caused me to not feel good? What has occurred? And by doing that, she said, when you do that for a while, you start to see a trend and you truly start to see what gives you more energy, what brings you joy, what brings you peace. And then in turn, what are the things that you really don't like? And see if you can not do as much of that or remove that element or that task or person or whatever from your life because it just eats the energy away from you. But I love how you tie the seasonality into it and understanding fall is the time to let go. Well, if fall is the time to let go, but yet you've got all these brand new projects coming, it doesn't sound like it syncs up. So what is it that I can do for myself in order to support myself to be able to
Yes.
produce and ride through this project or whatever it is?
Yeah, 1000%. What you're talking about there is that self-intimacy, right? And it goes back to that leadership skill of discernment, which you can't have unless you have that self-intimacy, where
Yeah.
you know yourself so well, and then you can make decisions based on your data. And so much of being a leader is being able to make decisions. And I love the example you gave because that's actually the one that I was going to give is like, what would it be like to be a leader and not have an answer right away? And see that as empowerment, not as a detriment, but you're doing it intentionally because you'll actually give a much better response, more thoughtful response, if you have space and time to digest and think about it versus trying to be the smartest person in the room.
Right.
That's one of the ways that you take your power back. It could be so simple as I've had clients say, like, when somebody asks them, how are you doing in a workspace, not jump to good, okay, but to be like, you know what, I'm okay. Like, I'm not great right now. So then you're letting people know kind of this, that doesn't mean that they have to walk on eggshells with you or whatnot, but just like that authenticity that you're giving to yourself, like you said, gives permission to other people, because it takes a lot of energy to put a mask on yourself to say, like, I'm good, when you're really not.
And sometimes it
So
only takes another person to listen in, another person to hear you out, because we know you take your power back when you speak about it. When you bottle it in, it's just going to fester and eat away with you. And that's why sometimes people say, all I needed to do was vent or air or whatever it was. I don't expect you to have an answer for me, because potentially it's for their personal life. But just by sharing and having that compassionate, empathetic person on the other side to be able to hold space for them can make the world a difference. So yes, I so like that.
yes. Yeah. I call it being witnessed. There's so much power in being witnessed. And then I just kind of want to speak to what you were saying about knowing what brings you joy, the passions. Obviously, that's going to give you a lot more energy, and it's going to create much more sustainability from a balance perspective. But the other thing that I want to shed light on, because like I said, I've done leadership development for groups and companies, is that oftentimes we think, well, if I just do what I love, like, who's going to do the other stuff? And it's really kind of fascinating, because when I do this in groups, it's oftentimes like the thing that you don't like to do, somebody else actually enjoys it. And I've seen it over and over again, but we don't think that that's possible, because we think everybody likes what we like and everybody loves the same thing. And that's, again, goes back to the benefit of having diversity on your team, and knowing and having honest conversations of, like, this is not just a strength, because I think a lot of, like, oh, I could be strong in something, but I don't necessarily like it. It doesn't necessarily mean it's energy giving, right? Like, my husband's always like, you're so good at planning. And I'm like, but I don't love it. It's not, I don't get like energy from it. I can do it well. So like, I've even had people say, like, I hate PowerPoint. I hate putting a presentation together, and somebody else just like, I love PowerPoint because I feel like I can tell a story in the PowerPoint. And it's like so fascinating. And I love that experience when people see that, this goes back to nature. Nature is an ecosystem. It's designed to support one another, right? Like, trees do one thing, ocean does another thing. Everybody has a piece of the puzzle. And I really believe that's how we're designed as well. But when we're not authentic, when we don't know our brilliance, and we are not aware of, like, the things that are not in alignment with how we're designed, we're trying to be everything to everyone, to be the best at everything. We create a culture of burnout instead of an ecosystem that really helps a culture thrive.
That is such a great call it. Although I still don't know what the mosquito does in the environment. But that said, um, yeah, I don't disagree. And so tell me a little bit about, if you're hearing this and you're like, oh, this sounds great, how do I start? When you think about creating structures, because that's kind of what we want to do, how would you guide somebody who wants to now create a structure or start that path to living that individual design and need, if you will? How do you tailor that?
So the first thing that I would say is to really just set an intention to get to know yourself really well. And that could, be like just getting curious. Like you said, I have journaling, is definitely one way to do that. I also have a book. I still haven't found what I'm looking for now. There's 21 inquiries in that book, so you can download an e-copy of that for free on my homepage. But starting that process of getting really curious about, like you said, like, when do I notice my energy comes up? What decisions, like, I'm in a good mood, something positive happened. And I don't believe, like, we need to put everything based on external circumstances. I think a lot of it is internal. So really looking at it from a lens of, like, what decision did I make, or what was I engaging in? That curiosity, and even just keeping a list, so I create logs for so many of my clients on different things, so one is like an energy tracker, like what brings my energy up and what drains my energy. That is such a powerful way to start. And then once you have your data, okay, how can I use this data to change how I operate, right? So maybe when you're going in a meeting, instead of leading with, this is what I'm so passionate about this, or this is something that I want to work on, or like kind of sharing your voice or your opinion, you kind of what I call be the thermometer instead of the thermostat, where you're like kind of measuring, oh, what's the vibe? And I'm just gonna like respond and acclimate to that vibe as opposed to I'm gonna create the temperature in the space. So I know, like, I see that when my team has time, like even you and I, when we got on this call, you said let's spend a couple of minutes to get to know each other, right? Because you probably have data that helps create a better conversation when you're having the podcast. I mean, it's these really little things. Like, what do you notice kind of cultivates the culture that helps your employees or your team thrive? And how can you be, like you said, more strategic and operational about it? Which kind of leads me to that second thing that I was talking about when it comes to balance. So the one was like not being good receivers. The other one is not giving value to intangible things. So a lot of what I find, I know you're an energy healer. So, people who are sensitive, who are kind of are very emotionally aware, we don't give credit to all of the emotional space holding that we do. So like you said, if you have a team member and you're just giving space for them to vent, when it comes to productivity, we might be like, how is that measurable? Right? Because we don't, maybe the culture hasn't seen it as valuable because it's not output, but it's incredibly valuable because if you're giving space to a team member to vent, they're not spending all of their energy thinking about something. You've created safety in the space. They can be a lot more focused and productive because they feel cared about. That is so valuable. But if that's not on the checklist of assessments, right? But that made a difference when this come back to the empowered expression, right? Is that you give voice to your brilliance and your values. You give credit to it first. Then you'll start to see that the work will respond to that and start giving credit to it. I mean, I did that in my own marriage. I was like, when I took a break, I was the breadwinner and I stopped earning. I felt like, oh my God, I'm not contributing. But I was doing so much energetic and emotional work in the home, and I was feeling resentful until I started giving credit to it. And so even when I work with people and I say, like, one of my gifts is I can see the bigger picture and I can see multiple things at the same time. I can hear where your past is holding, kind of contributing to this. I can see what the opportunity is in the present moment, and I can see what you desire that you're not giving yourself permission to. That's a gift that I have. That's not a strength on a job application that you see, right? But unless I give credit to it and I give value to it, I'm going to feel like what am I doing as a coach?
Right.
And so that's another piece, is like really kind of noticing and giving value to the intangible ways that you contribute. It's so, so incredibly powerful for creating more harmony and balance. And I know this is like, a stretch from probably anything that you've ever heard. It's probably different than anything that you've ever heard. So it might feel a little like, okay, how do I do that? But it's the same thing, like we're saying, like keep an energy tracker, what drains you, what kind of lifts you up, and what did you do in that space? And also listen to what people say to you. Like one of the things I started to hear people say all the time to me was, you have such a warm presence, right? That's kind of like, okay, how do I put that on a resume, right? But if I can create, again, a safe space for people to open up as a coach, that is invaluable for leaders who feel like they can't be vulnerable, right?
Right.
So listen to what people say to you about you and start giving yourself credit for it.
Yeah, it's great because you're right. There's a lot of attributes that you don't put on a resume that you probably can't talk about during an interview, but that makes you that trusted leader, that authentic leader, that strategic leader, because now you understand the culture, the emotions, the strengths of the individuals. Because, I've always talked about, we talked about the paintbrush, but I've always talked about, if you're a new leader, what's the one thing that you can do to make a significant impact day one? It's getting together with your team members, getting to know them. What do you like about your job? Why are you here? What type of feedback do you like? Do you like to receive accolades in front of your colleagues, or are you more of a private person? How do you want us to have difficult conversations? And then when you
Yes.
share that as from the leader side as well, so they know how you want to be approached or how you want to be questioned. The trajectory in how you work together with that team just explodes because now you understand the people, and you're not just treating them, I'll call it, for lack of a better phrase, like cogs in the wheel, right? You
Yeah.
actually care.
I mean, imagine how much easier that makes life when you're not like trying to play games to try to figure out what your boss likes and how to be around them. When you could be again, that's authenticity. So upfront about like, this is how I like to communicate. This is how I like to make decisions. This is how I like to interact. If we all just kind of like almost had a sign in front of us, right? And so that we're not playing this guessing game, and then we can, obviously accommodate and adapt, but we're not playing the game of trying to get the data. We know what the data is. But I do want to speak to something you said before, which is, there's sometimes things that we can't always speak to on a resume. And my invitation here, and this is part of the empowered expression piece, is learning how to articulate. Because oftentimes there's something, when it's intangible, as you like, it's not something that's in the culture, like being an energy healer, right? Maybe, oh, that might come with perception, blah, blah, blah. So how do I speak about that in a way that serves what the organization needs and is looking for? So I had a client, for example, who she tends to like just grow really quickly. So her team, she's an entrepreneur, she's a venture capitalist, her team kind of shifts quickly, and she was seeing that as kind of a deficit, because she's like, when she's talking to her investors, it makes it look like she's being inconsistent. And, one of the things, this is kind of like a whole other kind of conversation, but I'll just kind of drop a little nugget in here. A big thing about being in flow, to me, the way that I approach it is coming from feminine advantage in leadership, the feminine frequency, which, again, going back to nature, we look at the moon. The moon is a full moon. It's a, crescent moon, half moon, and dark moon, right? It's always changing phases. It's one moon. It's the same. It's not on all the time. It honors seasons, and it knows it's the flexibility and the agility. And so one of the ways that we articulated that is that she's constantly growing, and with growth, the people that you are surround yourself with might not always be the right fit, or in the form of it might not be the best for where the organization is going. But she's so connected to what the organization needs and how it's growing, that she can adapt and be agile and bring in the right support teams. That's such a different way to articulate it. I'm being inconsistent versus I'm a flexible and agile leader who's really attuned to the needs of my organization.
I love that. That was beautiful. Yes. And I think, I see, I wouldn't even have thought of doing that. But I think when you take that step back and you really celebrate your skill set or what you bring, to your point, really connecting with what is important to you, what are your skill set, and so how can you mirror that, because you probably do it on a daily basis. If you're an authentic leader, you do it on a daily basis. You support your team, but you're right, you probably don't take credit for it. But I love how you phrase that,
Right.
to be able to support and use during an interview and
Yeah.
on your resume. That's beautiful.
Yeah, and that's the empowered expression piece, is where you're drawing the connections, you're articulating, you're building the bridge for other people to see it.
Yeah.
And that's part of so much of expression and kind of confident communication is being persuasive, but not persuasive to manipulate, but being able to connect the dots so other people see what you're seeing, which is maybe they're not.
Yeah, true. I want to ask this question because I know we're running out of time. I could chat with you for like another hour. But what role do you think storytelling plays in shaping a leader's narrative and connecting their brilliance to their leadership? And you've talked a little bit about it, but I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on that.
Major major, because oftentimes the example I just gave you, right? I told you a story. If I said to you, give credit to the intangible and draw a connection for other people to see it, okay. Right, but it's something new. It's I maybe I've not seen that done before. I don't know how to do it, but I gave you an example of a story, right? I'm just going to ask you, did that make it easier for you to understand the point that I was trying to make?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And, it's also what I really love about storytelling. I just use a storytelling in a situation where I was like, I don't know if the person's going to be receptive to my advice. Right. And what I love about storytelling is it's a way to offer your insight and your opinion without being a know-it-all. Right. And so this was a personal situation, but it was about kind of like, how as mothers, our energy can affect our children, which I hated hearing when I was like, a new mom, because the last thing I want to hear is like, I'm messing up my kid. Right. But there is truth in it. Right. And it comes back to looking at as a way of like, how can I take my power back? And so instead of seeing myself as I'm messing up my kid, but seeing it as I have the power to be the thermostat instead of the thermometer. And I wanted to kind of convey this to another mother. And so I didn't tell all of that. What I did was I told a story about when my son wouldn't nap. I used to get so frustrated, and then I kind of like saw this message about putting the energy of what you want to feel in the milk. And I did it. And I remember I said it didn't work all the time, but it did work many times. And I don't know if it was for my son or for me, but it helped. And so that is a way that I could offer my insight without an "I told you so," that she could receive whatever she needs to receive. The other beautiful thing about storytelling is, from when you were talking about having a diversity, and of how people see things on a team, is people can take away different things from a story.
Mhm.
And not everybody needs to take away the same thing. And that's what I love about storytelling. So if you're talking about a similar situation, where you've overcome a problem, and you share that like with another team, maybe from a previous job or for the previous team, some of the lessons people might take away from that, like in my story that I told about with might be like, oh, that's the takeaway I'm getting from that is my energy affects my child. Someone else might be like, the thing I'm taking away from is that I want to be the thermostat instead of the thermometer, right? Like it's different, a different flavor. It might be similar things, but the way they receive it might be different. And that's a great way that you can really kind of influence a lot of people without having to tailor your message to each specific person.
Well, and that's why sometimes I re-listen to podcasts or you reread a book, right? You may, in a situation, you may take away, to your point, these three tips or these tidbits that you want to try, but then you'll come back in maybe 6 months and listen to it again and pick up something completely different.
One of the things I love to do, and I use storytelling in my coaching sessions all the time. And then I pause and I say, what's your takeaway from what I just shared? Because then it gives me insight into how that person's thinking, how they're evolving and how they're growing. And it kind of, again, it's like letting them have their own self-awareness, giving them a space for them to have their own self-awareness.
Yeah, yeah, love that. Great. So let me ask you the question before we go into what you've got for my listeners. I always ask this question to all my listeners. So, what's that biggest thing that you've learned through your journey, whether it was a lesson, an experience, or a book that you've read? What would you say the one profound lesson that you've had in your life has been that you can share with them on their growth journey?
I'd say the biggest lesson that I've learned is that uncertainty becomes a place of possibility when we activate our own inner natural leader.
Mm.
So I used to be so afraid of the unknown, and I always, was afraid to take risk. And a big part of my own empowerment journey was really stepping into my leadership, not just like a title at work, but true leadership in my life. And knowing that I have influence in situations, but it always comes back to how well do I know myself, and how am I giving my power away as opposed to being empowered in playing the role that, like really understanding who I am now and the influence that I can have. So yeah.
Yeah, empowerment is amazing when you have it, because when you are empowered and you are on, we talked a bit of earlier about being in the receiving as well, being open to receiving when you're empowered. What a feel, what a rush that is. So love that. I want to share before we end our beautiful conversation about what you've offered to our listeners. So I'm going to put this in the notes, but you've got two of the most popular planning workbooks on sale for our listeners. And this is just for our
Mhm.
listeners only. And you've also got a PDF on decision making. So maybe you can share a little bit about what those are.
Sure. So as you mentioned, this is a special link just for all of you listening, where the two workbooks that I spoke about, which is planning by season and the North Star Clarity Tool. So like, again, what is it that I'm seeking in this season? And then how do I, design based on that information. You can, I think it's a buy one, get one free or bundle or something like that. There's just a better price on it than normally. And the link will be in the show notes. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but that's something that your listeners could access. And then I also have a free resource. I have a couple because we mentioned a few that I didn't know that we were going to be talking about in this podcast. But the decision making one, as we've talked about, one of the things that I've noticed with a lot of my clients is that what gets in the way of their leadership is difficulty in making decisions. And I've seen common patterns, archetypes, the perfectionist, the people pleaser, the overperformer that tend to get in the way of being able to make empowered decisions. And so I created this decision-making matrix, which you can access. You can download the PDF for free. And you can also listen to a podcast where I kind of explain it a little bit more on that page that you'll see in the link in the notes. And then a couple of other resources that I mentioned, and I'll send you the links as well. But my book, if you want to have more of that self-awareness and have 21 inquiries to help you with that, you can download my book. That's just on my homepage, so anybody can download that at any time. And then the last one was my wisdom model that I talked about, the well-resourced professional. So there's a master class that I did on it, and the recording is on my website, drswetachawla.com/master, that you can see the wisdom model and you can listen to a podcast, not a podcast, a master class where I walk through it. So I know there's tons of resources there, but I hope you find something that could be helpful for you.
That's a lot of goodies. Thank you so much. These tools are super beneficial. It doesn't matter whether you're a brand new leader or whether you're somebody who's been a leader for a long time and just wants to explore different things and find better ways to be a leader in today's ever fast-paced changing world. So thank you so much for your time. I truly enjoyed my time with you. And I know my listeners will be excited to access some of your tools. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me and for creating the space for being able to, I really think, create an innovative way of leading, which is being in balance. So I really, like I said, resonate with the work you're doing. And I'm honored to be able to contribute to it.
Oh, thank you.
That's all for this episode of Today's Balanced Leader. I hope you've enjoyed the discussion on wellness and leadership, and that you took away some valuable insights and strategies to help you become a better leader in your own life. Please leave a rating and review. I'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss the next one, as we continue our exploration of what it means to live life as today's leader. In the meantime, take care of yourself and remember that true leadership starts with taking care of your own well-being. One deep breath in and one deep breath out. Keep striving for excellence and inspiring others to do the same. And finally, thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time on Today's Balanced Leader.